Hi, I wanted to come on to share another journal entry I had written. And this one was actually an entry I started writing after reading a particular point in scripture. Um, so, one of my goals for this year was to actually read the Bible from front to back through and through the whole entire thing, because I have never done that and actually never really read scripture before. So I just thought I would share some of my lessons and thoughts that came from this particular point in scripture. And it is 1 Kings 17, verse 7 through 24. And I won't read the entire passage, but it is Elijah and the widow. And so the entry I wrote down was titled Self Love, Selfless, a Delicate Balance. And yeah, I'll go ahead and share some of the passage, but basically, well, I'll just go ahead and share. So I'll start here at verse 10. So it says, so he went to Zarephath. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. Probably not, but that's okay. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink?" As she was going to get it, he called, "And bring me, please, a piece of bread." She said, "As surely as the Lord your God lives," she replied, "I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son so that we may eat it and die." And I'll stop there because my first, thought that came to mind was that this lady, she was at a point in her life where she was feeling helpless and hopeless, and she was like ready to give up. And here comes this stranger asking her for something that she thought she didn't even have. And instead of her just saying like no with an attitude or something, she said, she was humble enough to say, "I don't have that. I don't have what you're asking for. And the thing was is that before he asked for the bread, he asked for water, and she willingly was going to go get that for him. So it wasn't that she didn't have a posture of not wanting to give. It was just that she thought she didn't have anything to offer. So yeah, and it really just, I just started writing about the things that were kind of going through my mind as I was reading this particular point. And so yeah, she was humble enough to say, she didn't have it. Um, and so it goes on to say that she, yeah, yeah. So it goes on to say here that Elijah said to her, this is verse 13. Elijah said to her, "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. And then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord your God of Israel says: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." She went away and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with what the Lord, in keeping with what in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. So after he had confirmed to her that what you, let me back up. For her to say, "I don't have bread, I don't have what you're asking me for," but she was humble enough to say, "But I do have this." It was her to say, "This is what I have in my hand to offer." And he told her, "Okay, well, go and create what I just asked you for and bring me some and share with me." and you'll have more than enough. And I like that particular point because it's like she didn't even question. She didn't doubt. At no point she didn't doubt anything that he said. He confirmed to her that whatever you have is enough and it won't run out. Just share, you know. And she did not question that at all. She went and did exactly as he had said. And it was like one of the points here I said was that, you know, God really gives us our daily bread. And literally in this situation, she was going to be supplying Elijah's bread, but in turn, by her doing that act of service and sharing what little she had, she actually received more than her daily bread. Her daily bread for every day, actually, for herself and her family. So it was about her opening her hand to be willing to listen and offer and to share. Um, and it's also reminding me of, I think that a lot of people feel like they don't have a lot to offer, and maybe it's from like a low self-esteem or a low self-concept, or maybe it's even a scarcity mindset. I understand that too. It's like you feel like you're in a state of survival. You're just trying to make it. That what do you possibly have to offer? But everybody has something to contribute. It might not be monetary. It might not be, you know, a physical gift or an item, but it might be your time to listen to someone. It could be you maybe keeping somebody's kid so that that person, that parent can have a break. It might be you offering a word of encouragement or a piece of advice to someone who's struggling, or maybe to someone who's not struggling, but, or you don't even know they're struggling, but it's something that came to you and you wanted to talk to them. So everybody has something, and whether you place a high value on it or not, it's still worth something. And, you know, the very thing that you might not place any value on, somebody's looking for that very thing. So yeah, it's about just, you know, being of service. And I just thought that was really, really powerful, is what I got from this point in scripture. And so it goes on to say here in verse 17, it says, sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. He grew worse and worse and finally stopped breathing. She said to Elijah, what do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son? Give me your son, Elijah replied. He took him from her arms and carried him to the upper room where he was staying and laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die? Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him. The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, look, your son is alive. Then the woman said to Elijah, now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth. So not only did Elijah confirm to her the initial time at the first encounter that what you have is enough and it won't run out, and that your needs will be met, you know, you will have the supply that you need. But then he also had asked her to give a second time. So in both cases, it was given what she had with what few things she thought she already possessed. But then he asked her again to give me your son. And that point, it's like, especially as a mom, I could imagine, you know, for you to feel like you've lost her child to be dead, basically. And for him to say, okay, give me your son. So again, she was asked to give something she thought was lost, something she thought was like without any hope of revival. You know, he asked her to give. He said, give me your son. And Elijah just revived him, to show her that, by you giving and trusting in me, that I can give you back what you thought you lost. And it was just something that was so powerful for me because, and one thing I would say too was because now that, I didn't grow up in a church. And like my mom's side of the family, most of them are Jehovah's Witnesses. And I chose to not really join that particular religion. It just wasn't for me. And so my dad's side is Pentecostal. But either way, I didn't grow up having having a prayer life. I didn't read scripture. I didn't grow up in a church, so this is really my first time. I'm now in my 30s, but this is like my first time actually going through and reading scripture and like listening to sermons and understanding kingdom, so this is like my first time. But this whole point in scripture, really, the lesson I got from it was a couple, but it was just more so opening your hand to give into with whatever little or much you have, but to open your hand. And it's not until you open your hand that you can also receive. And then I get the whole point of like praise and worship and how people lift their hands and open their hands, because it's like in exchange, you give, but giving without expectation. Because when she initially gave Elijah the bread, she had no idea that her son would eventually be sick. She didn't anticipate that. And so by her initial act to give to him, later on, he would even do more. The Lord really came through for her in one of the biggest ways imaginable by her initial act of service. So it was about her opening her hand with what little she had and trusting in that, but it wasn't an expectation for something in return. So that was like really powerful for me. And I think that as far as like the daily bread, I think God provides us our daily bread in many ways. And I think for everybody, their daily bread looks differently. And what I mean by that is because for some people, I think maybe you've put together your last dollars to pay rent, but you don't have gas in the car. So maybe that was your daily bread. You don't have gas in the car, but you're not going to be homeless either. For some people, it might be sanity and peace. Maybe you're going through some mental health challenges right now and you feel like you're at the end of your rope. But, and I'll say this, especially like for parents, a lot of times, especially moms, we say like, these kids are getting on my last nerve, or this job or this thing is getting on my last nerve. And for some reason, it's like the last nerve never comes. It's like we're still able to go on. So maybe your daily bread is like God giving you the stamina and providing you some peace to get through whatever situation you're in without crumbling. Maybe that's your daily bread. And so it looks different for everybody. For some, it might be a new opportunity that you didn't even expect to come your way. So, or somebody just helping you and you didn't even ask for it, but maybe they offered to help you. So daily bread looks different for everybody, but it's about knowing that God will provide what you need. He knows exactly what you need. So yeah. And I said here in my notes that an act of service is an act of love. And to trust that what you have is enough to offer is a really key thing. Not thinking from a point of scarcity, but really looking around to see, okay, what can I offer someone? And to just have that posture of wanting to give freely, without expecting something in return necessarily. And I also had noted here was that I think it's interesting that, you know, I'll just share a moment of transparency here. And I think I mentioned it in another one of my videos, but I had been someone who had struggled with like severe depression and anxiety for majority of my life, but I didn't really understand the magnitude of it until last year when I started to feel like suicidal and sort of like I realized, that I was in trouble. I realized that. So when I was at work, I was showing up as a person of everything's fine, everything's fine. But internally, I was really just dark and feeling like this cannot be it. Just feeling hopeless and helpless, really feeling like that. But I was showing up as something different. And I'll give you an example. So I can remember one of my coworkers, his dad had passed, and I just felt this urge to like want to like buy him a candle, and I wrote him a little word of encouragement on a post-it and put it on his desk, um, just to brighten him up a little bit. And I started doing things like that to give to food drives and to give. And it wasn't that I was expecting anything back, but I just internally felt like I really cared how people felt as far as them feeling good about themselves. I really was feeling like that. And I didn't want people to be sad. And I think everybody can use some enjoyment in their day and just to brighten someone's day. I really was feeling like I wanted to give and contribute. And I noticed that even though I was feeling depressed, I still felt like I wanted to give. And when I started to give encouraging words and little gifts and tokens of gratitude to people, when I started to actually open my hand and give, as opposed to solely just focusing on my darkness, my depression, my feelings, my. Once I started to open up, it's like that hope and that gratitude and that joy that I was giving out, it came back to me and kind of brought me out of my pit of depression. And I didn't even expect that would be the result of it. I didn't even anticipate that, but that's exactly what happened, because as the months progressed, I started to be open to receiving encouragement and healing, and it was like things came into my path to nurture that. And as I'm going through my healing and spiritual journey here, it's like I'm understanding the true importance of serving and willing to help others, and that also would help you. But it's not giving with the intention of getting, so it's that whole having the correct posture of giving as well. So I had given out hope and gratitude, and I received back actually so much more. So yeah, that's what I got here from this point in scripture. So yeah, whatever you have, it might not be a money or a physical item, but it might just be your time. It might be advice, and especially advice, because another little tangent here, but not one person in the world has been through every single experience. I know it can feel like that. I know it can feel like that. But not one single individual has been through every single life event and every single challenge and trial that comes. We all have a different path and a different set of experiences and trials in our life. And if you've been able to overcome something and go through something and rise from something, then you can pass that on and share. So whatever you have to give, somebody is looking for that very thing. So just be open to give. And as far as like the self-love piece, right now, I can truly say that it seems to be more people willing to go to therapy or and to really ignite their healing and to do the inner work and discover who they are and to understand how to love themselves and nurture themselves and that whole thing. But I think with that process, it's really important to not let that go overboard to where you're only caring about oneself. It's still caring about yourself, yes. Healing, yes. Showing yourself compassion and grace and love, yes. But it's also coming out of that to be able to help someone and love someone else and share with someone else and care and show empathy and compassion for another. It's also that piece as well. So it's about a balance. That's what I learned from this point in scripture. So I just wanted to share that. And I think I'll come on and just share maybe another couple of videos today. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you guys on the next video. All right.